And we're live.
Alrighties.
We should have... Don't we have anything? No.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Should be. Yay. There we go.
All right.
So...
Is this the working one? Yeah, that's the working one. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I have the chat. Yeah. Okay. Let's try again.
Alrighties.
So, should we start with you telling something about yourself, Tria?
Yeah. Hey y'all, it's Triateyal, and I'm over here on Linda's channel today to talk about sex repulsion. I've been busy during Asexual Awareness Week. I have a few live streams up on my channel. If you haven't watched any of them, please pick one. I know they're like an hour long, so just pick which one you think you know the least about. That would be great. If you have watched me all week, I don't know what's wrong with you, but thank you. Today I'm just over here hanging out with Linda and talking about one of the subjects that I had planned, which is sexual repulsion.
Yeah. So, should we start with some question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We can start with dating.
Oh Lordy, we're starting off with that one. Why don't we define what sexual repulsion is before?
Yeah.
Because people think that it instantly means like you don't like all acts of sex and you don't like any of the lead ups to it, and that's actually not what it is. Sexual repulsion is actually, and they also often think that sexual repulsion is like an asexual thing, and it's actually not. Anybody, whether they're asexual or if they're allosexual, what we call people who are not on the asexual spectrum, anybody can feel sex repulsion. And it's not always trauma related. A lot of times it has to deal with preference. And sometimes it does deal with trauma. Mine is non-trauma related mostly. There are a couple of things that are trauma related, but I was sexually repulsed before the abuse that I'm open about actually happened. Another thing that I'd like to bring up is that some people do wish that they had a cure for sexual repulsion. I don't know that there is one. I am not a medical professional, and I tend to avoid people. I tend to avoid any medical treatment because it causes me major stress and anxiety. But like sexual repulsion also varies. Some people just feel a little bit uncomfortable. Well, they just feel uncomfortable, and some people will almost want to throw up at the thought of certain sexual acts, even if it's a thought that pops into their head. I am not quite on the want to vomit end of things, but there are certain sexual acts that gross me out to the point where I do feel where I don't feel sick necessarily, but extremely uncomfortable. But not all discussions of sex make me feel that way. Not every kind of sexual act makes me feel that way, just very specific ones. And I'm not going to outline what those are because it's kind of a trusted information thing that I have that I tend to keep to myself, because people are assholes and tend to like to use it against you. So, but it varies, it ranges, it doesn't affect any one specific group of people. And I mean, for some people, just even thinking about sex just makes them feel horribly sick. And and it's difficult to traverse this world, especially as an American. I can't speak for other countries, but America is very sex centric as far as I'm concerned. Like, it's not sex positive, but it's very sex centric. So I did want to any clarifications for what I just said needed, Linda?
I was just I was wondering, how do you cope with feelings? Do you develop feelings when you?
I used to, especially right after I stopped dating and before I found out that I was ace. A lot of times I would basically shut off. Like, I would go and do what I absolutely had to for the day, and then like turn all media off, stop talking to people, and just like basically no communication whatsoever with anybody. And then to reset my brain. And I'm not sure, I don't think that was an unhealthy way of handling that, but I hate that I had to put myself in that place in order, like, I basically had to go and deal with work and advertising and being bombarded with stuff. Because I mean, even when you don't see sex necessarily on the screen, in context, especially in a lot of sitcoms which show during the day and soap operas which show during the day at work, I would be forced into the break room, and the break room would have like soap opera on, and it's very, very dramatically in your face. There's all that sexual tension and stuff, and like like I said, I don't think my ways of coping with it were unhealthy. I think that in a lot of ways, not having a way to deal with it during the day or an escape during the day kind of did not help. And there are some people who are worse off than I was. Keep that in mind. I have over time kind of developed coping mechanisms that are kind of ingrained. Like, I find sex absolutely hilarious. I've had to make it funny. Because that is the only way for me to deal with it. Which is why oftentimes I'm okay with most sex jokes. Sometimes when sex talk gets a little bit more serious, it gets a little bit too much for me. But that's been one of the things that I've done. And just like having to spend time, I guess, retraining my brain to be okay with things. Because you can't, like I said, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but here in America, you cannot leave your house without being bombarded with some sort of advertising or commercial or whatever. Even things that aren't so overt, like those subtle signals are there. And sometimes sometimes asexuals are a little bit more sensitive to them.
Okay. Should we start off with your topics and then end with questions, or what do you think?
I think I kind of covered most of my topics, if I remember right. Just making sure that we set the groundwork for understanding what sex repulsion is. Because like I said, it's not oh, I don't want sex at all. There's varying levels of it. And a sexual act, if it grosses you out enough, just that one sexual act can put you, or that thought of that sexual act can put you in the category of sex repulsed.
Oh, so if you have a bad experience with sex, then you can
be sex repulsed. That does not necessarily make you ace.
No.
Some aces have become essentially ace because of trauma. That is not everybody's experience. But if you do have a extremely bad experience with sex, it can cause sex repulsion. But I do want to reiterate, you don't necessarily have to have a bad experience in order to develop sex repulsion.
No.
I had sex repulsion before I had my bad experiences with sex.
Okay. So they're not really connected.
No, they're not. And each individual person is going to have a completely different experience. Based on their own prejudices, based on their own influence, based on their own experiences, stuff like sometimes I think religion can aggravate sex repulsion, especially if you grew up in a guilt-ridden church. But that's not always the case, and I'm not 100% sure that's why I'm sex repulsed, especially after realizing that at a certain point I had no guilt about what I had done. I just felt yucky about it. Guilt and repulsion are not the same thing.
No. So, do you date?
No, I don't date. And it's partially because of the sex repulsion. It's one of many factors that make it complicated. Where I live, people assume that, and it's an extremely Christian area. People assume that at some point you're going to have sex, even if we're waiting until marriage. And it is, if I were sex neutral or sex positive, I could work with that. But because I am sex repulsed, and because sex at best doesn't interest me, and at worst makes me feel terrible, I also have this weird perspective that sex and love can work together, but not for me. Like, I can't have sex and stay in love with the person. That's part of my sex repulsion. And it's kind of dangerous to tell people around here that sex is off the table permanently. Because oftentimes they don't believe you, and then they think, oh, I can change your mind, or oh, she just means after marriage, or they come up with any reasoning other than what I flat out told them. Or worse, they do believe me and then get angry because of varying factors. One of them is, I often feel like some Christians, not all, but some Christians, because they're taught to feel so guilty about their sexual feelings, that coming across somebody who doesn't have them or doesn't want them can make them very upset, because it's like, well, I'm suffering, why aren't you? And again, this is not everybody's reasoning, but that's a big thing. And then there are others who will try to manipulate you into being sexual. I've had a lot of experience with that. And it's just, for me, where I'm at, it's not safe. I do realize that there is a thing such as long distance relationships. I don't do well on them. They don't meet my needs. I'm the kind of person who does best like being in the same room with the person and like because I do like affection. I do like physical affection. I'm not completely like averse to touch. In fact, I need a certain level of it in a relationship, and if I don't get the level of affection that I need, it does not work. This does not mean that sex repulsed people cannot date. This does not mean that sex repulsed people cannot find somebody to make them happy. It does not mean that you can't have a relationship. It's just personally, with my experience and my history, I tend to avoid dating because I don't feel like it's safe for me to.
Okay. So there where you live, it's like you gotta have sex or else you're not normal.
Yeah, it's very much like that. And sex repulsion is often seen as something to fix or correct. And while I feel badly for people who are hurting because they are sex repulsed, I can't say that I completely understand it because that's not my experience. I can empathize as best I can, but that is not my personal experience. I don't know what it's like to go out and try to get sex repulsion diagnosed and treated as a medical issue. I refuse to. I don't feel like it's necessary for my life. I don't feel like it's something that I even want or need. And I am done trying to fix myself to fit what other people want from me. I will not do that anymore.
No.
But there are people out there who seek treatments. I don't know how viable any of those treatments are. You would have to ask somebody who has gone through those, who is allosexual, not on the asexual spectrum, and sex repulsed, because most asexuals who are sex repulsed tend to avoid treatment because once the sex repulsion is gone, they want you. There's this thing where it's like, we must make you want and desire sex, and that's essentially changing an asexual's orientation, and you can't do that.
No.
So, like I said, I don't know what it's like for the allos. You would have to ask one of them. And also remember, not all aces are sex repulsed. Some of them are sex positive. Some of them are sex neutral. I'm just speaking about it from the perspective of an asexual, because that's where I have the most experience and knowledge.
Yeah. So what kind of treatment do you have? Do you know that?
I haven't really looked into it a lot because that would be kind of traumatizing for me. At one point, if I had known there were treatments available, I probably would have asked for them, and that would have created even more problems for me.
Yeah.
Again, not saying don't go seeking out treatment if you feel that it's necessary, but for me, if I were to look at them and find out that a therapist was using similar-ish methods to what boyfriends did to me, I would not come out okay of that research. It would cause triggering, because that's what my first boyfriend tried to do. Was he tried to fix my sex repulsion and fix my lack of attraction and lack of sexual desire through systems of punishments, essentially. And anything closely resembling that throws me. So I don't even look at that information again. I'm sure there are other people who know more of the medical side of things.
Yeah.
Also keep in mind that asexuals have been pathologized since the 1960s. And sex repulsion was part of that. So I'm not even sure that sex repulsion is something that needs to be fixed, because I feel like it was so pathologized. But that's my own personal experience, and I cannot look at a person and say, oh no, you shouldn't go see a doctor about this, because that is the individual's choice. But it does concern me how much repulsion is thought to be a mental disorder and treated like a mental illness, with all of the stigmas and all of the discrimination that comes with it.
Oh. So they treat it like a mental disease. That's weird. That's
Yep,
really
it's
weird.
treated like a mental disease. I did a little bit of research on that this week.
Okay.
Wasn't able to do that stream, but it was kind of eye-opening to see that the asexuality and sex repulsion as a mental disease thing has actually been around for decades. Well, that didn't surprise me. What surprised me was that it was actually a mental diagnosis in the DSM, which is what doctors and psychiatrists and other people use to diagnose mental disorders.
But is it in your mind or your body that you have the...
It is in my mind, but again, I don't see it as a mental disorder in the sense of needing to be treated. I don't think it's something that absolutely should be treated. I think it's up to the individual, and I think that our stigmas about mental illness need to kind of be thrown into a dumpster and lit on fire like the dumpster fire it is.
Yeah.
And please remember, I am not a medical professional, and I cannot speak for what somebody else wants or what treatments they desire to seek out. But I do ask that if you are seeking out treatment, make sure you are seeking out the treatment because you want it and not because you're under societal pressure from your partner. That it is something you want and need.
Yeah. So... when did you find out that you had sexual repulsion?
When I was 31, my best friend had tried to get me to look at asexuality.org, which is like the biggest resource / discussion forums for asexuals. She actually sent me, well, she didn't send me, she kept begging me to go look. And when I did, and I found out the word asexual, there were a lot of other discussions about being sex neutral, sex positive, and sex repulsed. And I had always known that I didn't like sex, and I didn't like things that I like doing actions that some people think lead up to sex, but I don't like the idea that it's going to. Like, I don't like the expectation that it's going to go there. And I kind of knew that, but I didn't have like really wording for it or a way to verbalize it properly. I didn't have a way to communicate it, and I couldn't figure out, like, I knew the feeling was there, but I couldn't sort it out completely myself. It was kind of like a foggy notion that it was there. And then I looked back on all of my experiences, and one of the first questions I asked, which is kind of natural, was, am I repulsed because of what happened to me, or was I repulsed before?
Yeah.
And I kind of looked at like what was happening before I was abused, and I figured out that no, I've pretty much always been sexually repulsed. I also don't, I am not really sure whether I'm repulsed because of my Mormon upbringing. Like, I don't know if that has anything to play with it. But the thing is that I have no desire to fix it. I have no want to change. So, like, it doesn't really matter whether or not Mormonism caused it, because going back and taking those steps would be something that I don't want to do to myself.
Yeah.
So, but I was sexually repulsed before I was abused. A lot of people hear about my stories because I'm open about it and think, oh, it's because she was traumatized. It's like, no, it was there. It's always been there. Sex scenes in movies would turn me off completely. Like, I just wouldn't want to watch them. Anything with sexual tension, like, I didn't know that's what it was necessarily, because I was a lot more oblivious back then. And I would watch things with sexual tension in them and then be like, I don't like this. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Stuff like I don't watch porn. Porn does not interest me. It means watching sex. I mean, depending on the kind of porn, it could probably hit my sex repulsion, but there's a disinterest there as well. And it's just, and also my first kiss kind of sucked. My first kiss was not necessarily sexual, but like, I knew that once I started kissing, the other stuff would be expected. And during my first kiss, I felt really sick to my stomach and like really upset. And I wouldn't say guilty, because it wasn't guilt. And I don't think it was necessarily being ashamed, because I didn't regret what I did, but it was just like, it was not a fun experience for me. And I wish I'd been more informed and realized that was kind of giving me a warning signal that things were not going to be so great later on.
Yeah. I haven't got any more questions. Damn.
Let's see. I'm trying to think, because there's a lot more into it I can go. I don't think I defined what sex positivity. Oh, another interesting thing. You can be sex repulsed and sex positive at the same time.
How does that work?
How it works, and I feel like I should also talk about what sex positive, sex neutral, and sex repulsed is. Sex positive are people who can either be sexually positive for themselves or sexually positive for others. If you're sexually positive for yourself, it means that you are happy to engage in sex under the right circumstances. Obviously, consent is king. You engage in sexual activities. It doesn't bother you. And you can be sex positive towards other people, which means, generally speaking, you don't see sex as a bad thing. Sex is not necessarily a horrible thing, and again, under the right circumstances. Some people like to use sex favorable to identify for themselves. As far as like, I'm sex favorable, I'm favorable to engaging in the acts of sex. But I tend to be sex positive in the sense of, if everybody's on board and everybody's happy about it and everybody's having fun, then, and you've got your consent, whatever y'all want to do, that's cool. I also think that having a more sex positive culture would also include asexuality a little bit better. Because if you you cannot consent if you do not have the ability to withdraw that consent. Because then you're being forced or coerced or manipulated in some manner.
Yeah.
And with aces, and this is my personal view, there are aces who will argue me down about this. So don't think that what I'm saying represents the entire community, because we all have arguments over this issue. But basically, a lot of us think that if our culture was more sex positive, it would actually do a lot of good things for the asexual community and acceptance. Because if we remove the expectation that sex is universal, that sex is always a part of romance, that sex is, something that everybody feels, then we remove the problem of making people who aren't asexual feel kind of pressured into doing sexual things they don't want to, which is what happens a lot in asexual communities. We were told that we were going to grow up and we were going to have sex, and if we didn't, something was wrong with us. So we spent time trying to fix that.
Yeah.
And again, this is not everybody. Always, if you go into discussions, always ask multiple people, because we do have arguments in our community. But a lot of us feel like if things were more sex positive instead of sex centric, which is the idea that everybody, wants sex, and if you don't, you're a failure, mentally ill, etc., then people would be more accepting of asexuality and more accepting of people across the sexual spectrum completely. So I am sex positive. I do believe that sex work is work. I know that's kind of a controversial opinion, but I do believe that is actual work, that they get paid for what they do. There's nothing wrong with doing sex work, so it should be decriminalized. I do believe that, and again, if you're consenting adults and nobody's being manipulated, coerced, pressured, have your fun. Please discuss things first and stay hydrated. And then you have sex neutral. You have people who don't really care. It's like, it doesn't affect me. I don't really care. If my partner wants it, then, I'm happy to oblige, but it doesn't really do anything for me. But, I'm happy to make my partner happy. And then you have sex averse, sex repulsed, and sex negative. Sex averse and sex repulsed refer to people who generally, when they participate in the act of sex, or they think about it, or they're, like I said earlier, it's a whole spectrum of different things. And then you have sex negative, which does not necessarily mean that you are sex repulsed, but sex negative people tend to think that sex is a evil upon the world, and that it should be completely abolished, and that it causes more harm than good. A lot of times they spread the sight of sexually transmitted diseases. I can understand that opinion. I do not agree with it necessarily, but I understand where people come from with that stance. And that stance isn't always necessarily religiously affiliated. Like, it's not necessarily in the asexual community that you'll find somebody who's sex negative and from one of the Abrahamic religions. It can vary based on experience, perceptions. But there are aces who just would wish that sex didn't exist at all. And I could hear a lot of people screaming in the background, but what about having children? And I'm like, part of the argument that I've heard from their side is that you can do IVF now. Granted, it's expensive, but they're like, but if they're basically saying if humans stopped having sex at this point, we wouldn't actually die off. So, again, I do not agree with those statements, but I also want people to be aware of those differing viewpoints, because a lot of times when you talk to an asexual, it's the first one you've ever met, and you may or may not meet any more of them, and then you think that asexuality is just like what you're come across. Same with sex repulsion. It is a spectrum. It involves a whole bunch of different things. So just keep that in mind. And if you are going to be discussing with somebody, or if you're going to be promoting somebody, do your research. Do your research, do your research, do your research. If you are sex repulsed and you want treatment, do your research. Like, trust. If you have a trustworthy doctor, trust them, because I know that not all doctors are going to have your best interest in mind. A lot of doctors project, and it's a problem in the medical field, but do your research. Talk to ACEs. Talk to all ACEs, whether they're sex repulsed or not. Talk to people who are allo, who are sex repulsed. Try, if you're sex repulsed and you're thinking about medical treatment, don't go to the allos who aren't sex repulsed. Their perspective is, you've got to conform to us a good portion of the time, and can twist your feelings and make things feel worse. But do your research, talk to people. And also, I do want to reiterate that, and I'm not sure if I brought it up or not, but sex repulsion, I have things that are triggers for me.
Yeah.
But they don't always trigger me. There is a specific sexual act that really messes with my brain. And again, I'm not going to say it because I don't want it used against me later on. But there's a specific sexual act that, if I hear about it, will often make me a little bit uncomfortable, but not in a way that I can't handle it, but will sometimes throw me into flashbacks and into feeling sick. So keep in mind that somebody can tell you that they're sex repulsed and then be like, I can't handle it today, but then the next day be making sexual jokes with their friends. Because I have done that. I've said I'm sex repulsed, please be aware of that. And then everybody's like, oh, we can't talk about sex around here. It's like, I appreciate that. I'm glad you're willing to work with me, but maybe we need some clarifications here. Because I do participate in sex jokes. I do participate in goofing off and laughing when I'm in a good mood and when I'm in a good place and when I know I won't be triggered. But I do have days where it gets bad and it's like, I really want to shut everybody off and go away and like out by myself. So keep that in mind as well, that it works just like any other, that if your sex repulsion is trigger related, that it can not affect you at all one day and then completely destroy you the next.
So you talked about allos?
Yes, allosexuals is what aces or asexuals, people on the asexual spectrum, call people who are not on the asexual spectrum. Basically, the definition of asexual is you don't feel sexual attraction. Allos feel sexual attraction. And allos can also be sex repulsed, sex positive, or sex neutral. It's just those terms have a little bit more use for us as aces, because when we're dating or we're answering questions such as like, why don't you have a boyfriend, or why don't you have a girlfriend? Don't you want to get married someday? We need those terms to kind of sit down and speak with loved ones and partners about, these are the boundaries, these are the things that I deal with, or this is why you're not going to have grandchildren someday. Because that was actually the biggest conversation that I had, was sitting down with my parents. Well, actually, no, my mom was gone by then, but sitting down with my dad and saying, hey, I know you've kind of never really pressured me and you've never really asked, but I feel like I should tell you why, kind of deal. And I'm glad I did, because I found out that asexuality kind of runs in my family.
Oh.
I have at least, on my dad's side, I have at least 3 family members who are like within the like first cousins, and like, you know, no further back on the line than that. I have at least 3 family members who are ace.
Oh.
And he didn't know there was a word for it. He didn't know that, you know, and they had actually gotten married and had kids, but that was because they had to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't know that. I have a grandparent that I'm fairly certain is somewhere on the ace spectrum on the other side of my family. And I know I know she's repulsed. I don't know if she's allo but I know she is repulsed. But yeah, it apparently runs, and they lived in a generation basically of, you have to do these things.
Yeah.
And my dad didn't realize that the church that he was sending me to was sending me those signals. He's not okay with me removing my membership, but he is also completely understanding of why I'm never going back. Like, he hates it, and he wishes it were different. And he thinks that I'm wrong on my beliefs, but not necessarily wrong for not going back into that environment.
Yeah.
I just read what
nerdy.
Oh man. Let's see. I talked.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make sure that I'm covering all of my bases. Hey, chat, if you have any questions, please ask. I'm an open book. If there's something that I can't answer, I'll just tell you.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, earlier, I kind of should have known I was sex repulsed just based on my reactions to seeing anything sex related on TV. Like, I didn't see a lot, but even in even in TV that's meant for kids, there's still a lot of times a little bit of an undercurrent that they put in that you like kids don't understand, so it goes whoosh over their heads. Like, my little brain would pick up on those and be like, ugh.
Okay.
So, oh, Nerdy's getting fancy. Well, no, it depends on the kind of kimono.
Yeah.
I don't know if I know yukata is considered a kind of kimono, but most people think of like the fancy ones. Oh, I've had people argue me down. Oh God. Okay. So, let's see, what's her name? Wonder Woman came out. I like the movie Wonder Woman. I don't think it was the best movie on the planet, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the plot. I kind of enjoyed I'm a Harry Potter fan, so seeing Remus play a character was kind of cool for me. I love the idea of the Amazons in the way that they're presented in the movie. And basically they had her, and keep in mind I'm not really a huge comic book fan, and I enjoyed the movie, but I don't remember like the names and stuff like that. And it's partially because I was only able to watch it once, because basically it was girl leaves island full of women, girl meets guy, girl and guy like each other, girl and guy bonk. And it just, I don't know if this is my perception coming out, or like if it's my asexuality like rearing its ugly head. But I watched that movie and I was like, did they really have to have the sex scene? I was like, you could show so, like, I didn't have a problem with like girl and guy meeting each other and liking each other, even though that is a fucking overused trope that I wish would not be used in damn near every movie. But the sex scene felt so forced to me, and I was like, they could play around that, and like there's other ways to show interest and you don't have to go there. It didn't feel like it fit for me. And so as much as I enjoyed the movie and liked the movie and enjoyed that there was a female-centric superhero that was done rather well as far as I was concerned, I can't watch that movie again because the romantic scenes just feel jarring for me. And keep in mind also, I'm also kind of aromantic and I wouldn't say I'm romantic repulsed, but I'm also romantic averse too. So like sometimes romance is like, I kind of like this, and sometimes it's like, ugh, why again? Why? But I hate the trope of sex equals romance. Like, there are times when you can throw it in and it works in the story, and there are times where it's like, oh, this is the easiest way to say that they like each other.
Yeah.
And I even know people who are not on the asexual spectrum who are complaining about that. So it's the easy way out as far as I'm concerned, as showing that people like each other or love each other in most cases. There are some exceptions, like one exception is in The Matrix, when they have like we're going into battle and we're probably all gonna die, like orgy fest. That one didn't bug me because it felt like it fit in, because that's kind of what the Aloes would do if the world was going to end. I'm sure that's what they would do. And not all of them, maybe, but so it depends on how it's done. It's dependent on how it's represented. And again, sometimes my repulsion kicks in watching a sex scene. Sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on how it's portrayed, whether or not I'm more annoyed and angry versus grossed out. Because a lot of times I do get a lot of times I look and I'm annoyed or angry.
Yeah. That was annoying.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what was wrong with OBS.
Not your fault.
None of these programs like my microphone. StreamYard will cut me off at times. OBS will cut me off at times. YouTube, just out of the blue, will be like, nope, we don't like your mic. So,
yeah. It's just technology.
If you want an orgy, go freaking watch The Matrix again. Just skip to the scene right before they're about to go into battle. Like I said, that one I didn't mind so much because I'm like sitting there thinking, yep, that's what the Aloes would do.
Let's just have one big fuck fest. We're all gonna die.
Yeah, like I said, that's kind of. But honestly, can you argue with me on that fact? Like,
no.
Like, my version of that would be like, we're all gonna die. Can I cuddle? Hey, cuddle pop. Yeah, like, I just, no sex, just hold me. Thanks. That'd be great.
Yeah. No spooky.
I love how Nerdy's like, no one likes the love scenes in movies, do they? I'm like, ugh. I had an argument with somebody who wasn't my friend for too much longer after that. Because she told me basically that I needed to go to a doctor and get my sex repulsion fixed and go on hormone treatments. But I told her that I didn't really like romance so much in movies. Like, I had moods and I was not in the mood. And she was like, I'm never going to get romance. And this is the only way I can have it. And I was like, I understand that. But you need to understand that there are times where I'm not going to be able to, it's like, I don't fake being okay if I'm not, unless I don't feel safe. And I'm like, that's fine. You can watch them all you want. And I'm not going to tell you you can't in front of me. But don't expect me to play along. Don't expect me to be like all excited and into it with you. Because sometimes that's just not how I am. And she basically yelled at me and said, I'm never having romance or sex. This is how I get it. And she had her own separate issues. Basically, she was causing her own problems and then projecting them on me and then expecting me to just be okay with it. And I was just like, no, that's your problem. You don't need to fix me to make you feel more comfortable, kind of deal. But there are people for whom if you say, I'd like a little bit less romance around, they're like, no, you can take it all away. It's like, no, I don't want to take all your romance movies away. I just want to watch this one that doesn't have romance in it and have like a few that aren't kids movies that don't include romance. Like, you're still going to have all your romantic movies. You're still going to have all your sex movies. They're still out there. They're going to be produced no matter what. What's wrong with wanting some variety?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. Chat's going off the rails.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty much the word prude has been thrown in my face. I am not a prude. I don't judge other people's sexual choices as long as they're not forcing them in front of my face and forcing me to go along with it. Again, I am sex positive towards other people because I realize that unlike me, for a lot of people, they consider sex a need and a vital, important part of their relationships. So I get it as best I can. I understand that. And I am not here to take away your sex toys. I'm not here to take away having your fun. I'm not here to say you can't do those things because I I don't feel like that's helpful to anybody, and I don't want people to be forced to try to not feel something that they do. That has really done in a correct way has no harm. As far as I'm concerned, consensual sex, there's no harm to it. As long as everybody is happy and on board and, you know, you've discussed things, please discuss things before you start. Yeah. Unless you've been in a long-term relationship and you already kind of know all the boundaries and stuff. But, you know, y'all have your fun. Stay hydrated. Is pretty much my attitude.
Yeah. Spooky have 2 wishes left. Oh
no.
Oh
I
no.
I don't want to know. Okay, that one I'm cool with.
Want to know.
I'm cool with the wish for more wishes thing. Honestly, if I found a genie, one of my first wishes would be like, can all aces be accepted? And then hope it's not like a corrupt-a-wish genie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, yeah, we're not accepted. Sex repulsion is not accepted. It's considered something that should be fixed or cured, or get over it, is something that I've heard a lot. And I don't go wandering around up to everybody in random and be like, I'm sex repulsed. Usually I will say it to an acquaintance I'm going to be around a lot or to a really close friend. And the reactions, like people I thought would be okay, have not been sometimes, and people that I thought would never accept it under any circumstances was like, oh, well, there's other things we can talk about. That's cool, you know. I can find something else to discuss. So be aware that it's not an accepted thing. At all, really. And aces also have to be careful in the doctor's office with sex repulsion. They have to be careful in the doctor's office, period. But if you mention sex repulsion in the doctor's office, even as a slip, like not, because I tend to have the idea of you should be honest with your doctors, because you can't fix bodily problems unless you tell your damn doctor. And there have been times where I've said stuff like, I don't have a boyfriend because I'm ace, or I don't have a boyfriend because I am sex repulsed. And they've offered to send me to sex therapy on the spot.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's not necessarily accepted in the medical community. They've started to make changes. One of the changes is in the DSM, which I mentioned earlier, is they say that if it's not causing you distress, don't worry about it. It's not a medical condition. But it's like, what is causing the distress, though? Is it expectations? Is it societal pressures? Is it discrimination? Is it your partner pressuring you? Because that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Especially with the amount of people who have no clue about any of these things. You know, so I actually have to be careful. There's a doctor's office I literally cannot go to in this town. Unfortunately, it's the free clinic, because I made the mistake of dropping the bomb that I am ace and therefore not sexually active. And I would really, really prefer it if they accept me at my word for saying I'm not pregnant. Because the conversation usually goes, are you pregnant? No. Are you sure? I'm sure. Are you really, 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 really sure?
What?
Like,
I just said I was
okay,
sure.
listen, okay, I'm gonna be really pissed if immaculate conception is actually a thing, okay?
Yeah.
Like, I understand if a doctor's like, I have to do before I give you a drug, I'm legally required to, test you for pregnancy. I get that. But there's a difference between that and what usually happens at the doctor's office, which is you have to be lying. There's no way you're not having sex or no way you're not interested. So that's why I say, like, do extensive amounts of research.
Yeah.
To listen to a bunch of different viewpoints, listen to experiences of other people, determine whether or not the reason determine whether or not you're asexual, because that's going to factor into it. Because even if there is a treatment, and again, I know there's treatments, I don't know how effective they are, if they're effective or not. That is not an area that I know. Even if the sex repulsion can be treated and cured, which I'm kind of leaning towards it can't, but even if it can, that's not going to make you sexual. That's just going to get rid of the repulsion aspect.
Yeah.
It's not going to make you have sexual attraction. It's not going to change your orientation. It's only going to get rid of the sex repulsed aspect if it does that at all. And again, I'm not sure. And the reason I'm not sure is because so much of asexuality has been treated underneath the same problems as an allo who's just struggling with desire. Because I do believe that struggling with desire is an actual thing. I do believe that there are allosexuals for whom their sex drive drops, and that's a traumatic thing for them, and that's something they want fixed. But that is a completely different scenario than an asexual who is sex repulsed or an asexual who is sex neutral.
Yeah.
It's a completely different experience. So make sure that just make sure that you realize what your actual orientation is before you go in for any sort of treatments. Conversion therapy is hell and it does not work.
You've tried?
No, but I would have asked if it had been available. And I'm grateful I did not know conversion therapy was a thing. I am grateful that there were not libido drugs for women out there. I'm glad I did not know those things. I would have asked, and I would have gotten even more hurt than I already was.
Yeah.
But make sure that it is not your orientation. Make sure that it is, something else. Because if it is your orientation, that is not going to change things. Your sex repulsion, you might be able to learn coping mechanisms. I've learned a few on my own. Otherwise, I would not be able to function. But just be careful going into the doctor's office. I'm not saying don't go to the doctor's office. I'm not telling you not to get medical treatment. I'm not a doctor. I can't make that decision for you. But make sure you go in knowledgeable, because the doctor's perspective may be, we need to fix this no matter what it takes. And that can cause you harm. It can help, but it can also cause you harm. So please, please, please be careful going into a doctor's office over a subject like this. Don't hide it from your doctor. Don't, and get the help you need. But just be aware of yourself and the situation and what your doctor's goals are. Just be aware of all of those things. Do not walk into your doctor's office uninformed. I know they hate people doing research because it makes it harder sometimes to push things, but do your damn research. All right. So, kids in the chat, do you all have any actual questions, or are you just because I don't think I have anything else to add.
No. And we've been live for over an hour, so that's good.
Yeah. Sorry about the little pause in between while we were trying to figure out where to go from there, because
yeah,
it has been a fun week, but it has been a long week.
Yeah. Every stream I've looked at, I've seen your face. Tria's there. Tria's.
I totally forgot that, like, I planned 4 live streams on my channel this week, completely forgetting that, like, I was supposed to be on Bubs, and, like, I had planned yours, so, like, you were one of the 4, but I had planned Bubs, and then I didn't get all the research done as quickly as I would have liked. So I was doing, like, 9 hours of research on Tuesday, which unfortunately I didn't really use any of it, but at least I have that part done for when I go into that. And then, like, I have groceries today.
Yeah.
All right. I think that might be it.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and do you want me to chill out and then close out for the stream for the day, Linda?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm Triateyal. I talk about asexuality and ex-Mormonism. And occasionally I go on to Bub's channel and talk about something that has nothing to do with either of those things. I'm one of his 7 princes of hell. And this week has been a wonderful, lovely week of asexuality awareness. I feel like a lot of communication happened. I'm so grateful for anybody who showed up to any of these streams. I am not doing anything at all for at least the next week on my channel. I'm hibernating. I'm going to go to sleep, basically, and, like, essentially wake up maybe a late week later. I do want to do the stream that I canceled on Wednesday night. Postponed, not canceled, but called HSDD versus asexuality. And I kind of touched a little bit on that with Linda, but I'll go way more in depth about it, about how going to the doctor's office to get treatments for specific things can go wrong, how asexuality has been treated as a mental disorder ever since the 60s, things along that nature. There's a whole history behind it that I go into. So that one I'm planning on doing 2 weeks from now, just like hitting a live stream and, like, going ahead. The research is already there, so all I have to do is, like, read, get on and read them. But pretty much don't look for me next week. You'll see me on Twitter. I might be in some side chats, but as far as actually doing streaming or anything on my own, probably not. If you missed any of my live streams, please pick one. Like, if you missed all my live streams, please just pick one that you feel like you don't have a lot of knowledge about, and go watch that one. I realize that they're kind of long, but which is why I'm saying, not asking you to go back and watch all of them. I did a BDSM one, and I did a just a basic your basic showing of what asexuals are like across the spectrum. And so AIDS Awareness Week will be officially over at the end of the day, and then I'm going to go pass out and die.
Yay!
So thank you for having me on, Linda. This is a really good discussion. I'm sorry for all the tech issues.
We
Those tend
figured
to happen around
it
me.
out. It's okay. It's okay. We figured it out. And thank you for being on.
No problem. I didn't mind it at all. This was a great way to kick off your channel.
Yeah.
I also think it probably would be a good idea to say that not every discussion on Linda's channel is going to be about sex.
Yeah.
This is just something that we coordinated because it's AIDS Awareness Week, and we thought it would be a great way to kick off our channel. Not all discussions are going to be like this, so.
No.
All right. I will see you all like after I hibernate. Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Take care.